Oh, great. Thanks, Janine, and thanks, Joe, for hosting. Just so everybody knows from the outset, we are recording today's practicum. My name is Jeremy Pook. I'm a member of the GW2 chapter in Boston. The practicum today, maintaining your culture and engaging your workforce in a distributed virtual world. This is extremely timely. I think we're all still reacting and responding to what the whole world has been thrust into since the late winter, and it just is going to continue to keep going. So we're really fortunate to be joined by Kathy D'Agostino. Kathy is an associate certified coach and leads Win at Business Coaching. Janine, I'm so sorry. I don't want to mispronounce your last name.
Janine Boyce.
Boyce. So Janine Boyce, a president of Growth Terra. And before I just share, and most of you probably know their bios anyhow, just to give you a sense of what we're going to be doing during today's practicum. Companies are all looking to reopen, starting to reopen, thinking about how to position themselves to grow. And that to do that, they're going to need productive, highly engaged workforce, ready, that will earn the trust of their customers. Here we are, of course, during COVID. It has had an unprecedented impact on how and where we work. This practicum will provide growth-minded professionals and business owners the insights, tactics, and tools to move their business from surviving to thriving, tapping into the most important asset, which is their people. Just a little bit of background before handing it off to Kathy and Janine. Again, Kathy leads Win at Business Coaching. Kathy works with companies to help them develop their leadership teams, use their core values as a basis for increasing employee engagement, creating strong culture, and improving profitability. Before Win at Coaching, Kathy had a 20-year career at senior level positions for organizations where she was responsible for turning around underperforming sales teams. Janine with Growth Terra, she has a customer-centric 360 approach to growth, builds high-performing sales, marketing, and customer success teams, engages employees, and wows the customer. I don't want to take up any more time from either of them. So we look forward to the practicum. Just a few housekeeping details. Again, we're recording. The intellectual property of the practicum really belongs to Janine and Kathy. USA 500 Clubs is providing the platform for the practicum. The opinions are Janine and Kathy's. Sorry for the legalese there. The chat is open. We're a small enough group, so if people want to just raise hands, ask questions, feel free, or pose your questions in the chat. So please, Kathy, Janine, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy, and we're really excited to be here. And yes, questions or comments, please keep them going in the chat box. I'll be checking in every once in a while, and so we really appreciate, as Jeremy said, it's a small group, so let's get the conversation going. So Kathy and I are excited to be here and doing this today. This is something, as Jeremy said, that we are both really passionate about bringing out the best in people to help companies and to help our clients not just survive this pandemic, but to really draw on their employees and on the employees and their client organizations to help them thrive post the pandemic. And, so I have been reflecting on this, on the last few months and what has happened, as you said, Jeremy. And it's interesting, it's only been a few months ago that we were going to the office and we were interacting with people in meetings, face-to-face, in interacting with colleagues and clients. We were bumping into each other in the hallways and exchanging tidbits of information about what was going on in other parts of the organization or other companies with our colleagues and at home. And we were bumping and popping into people's offices to ask a question or to share an idea and get some feedback. And it just seems like so long ago that this was the case, because today our lives look a lot more like this. You know, we have been working from home, and for 70% of the people who are now working from home, this is the first time that they've worked from home on a full-time basis. And it's been quite an adjustment because in addition to the professional roles, we've been taking on additional roles as teachers, as childcare providers, as entertainers, as chefs. You know, I think we all know and have seen and experienced this. And our interactions with our colleagues and clients have gone from being purely professional to being purely authentic, as our homes and our kids and our pets are all making cameo appearances in our meetings.
Hey, Janine, I'm going to jump in there. Did you want to put the PowerPoint up for everybody?
Oh my gosh, thank you, Kathy. My screen?
Janine did this beautiful graphics and PowerPoints, and it really illustrates truly what she's talking about. So I thought maybe you want to go ahead and share that.
Yeah, no, Kathy, thank you. I thought that, I was sure that I was, hang on. Joe?
Yep.
Can you just double?
Bottom of your screen, it says share screen. It's a green.
I am
button.
here. Hang on, I pulled this out, but I thought I had shared my screen. I apologize. No matter how much, here we go. Share screen, okay. And
And it might make it easier to identify if you close
Right.
like your
Yeah.
emails and all that. That way you don't show any confidential information or anything.
no, that's right. I'm just sharing the,
You're illustrating what you were talking about because we're all showing our authentic selves.
Thanks for your patience, everybody.
well, this is,
Tell me what you're looking at, Janine.
no, I got
Perfect.
There we go. There we go.
here. It was just, I was looking for doing this one other way. Anyway, okay, so this,
You might want to put it in slideshow.
and I put it there, I was looking at it, so I apologize. All right, let me just move this out of the way. And I think that there we go. All right, so yes, let's continue. And now, why is it not? There we go. So this is what we used to look like. So here's what Kathy and I look like.
On a better day.
Oh, this is what our lives used to look like when we went to the office, you know, and it just, when I saw this, it was just brought back so many memories, and it seems like so long ago. And this one we felt just purely encapsulates what life is like today for many people, especially people, you know, who are living in the cities and trying to work out of their apartments. So what's going to happen next? You know, when it's time to go back to the office, will the office still be there? So I'm going to ask you, the audience, in the chat box, to tell us, what is your preference? Are you ready to go back to the office full-time, part-time, or would you like to be working from home and continue working from home on a full-time basis?
I'm not seeing the chat box, Janine, for some reason. There we go. Okay, now I see. Okay, Dana says a mix. Let's see. Alexa's mixed.
Yeah. And this is really consistent with what we're seeing. In fact, I just saw a presentation, some stats this morning from Price Waterhouse that said 83% of employees that they surveyed want to work at home at least one day a week after the pandemic. 72% wanted to work at home at least 2 days a week. And 55% of companies are actually expecting their employees to be there to do that. So that's really what we can expect going forward, is that it's going to be a mixed environment. You know, what we've learned through this pandemic is that remote work works, but we've also come to appreciate the value that the office brings, both in terms of opportunities for interaction, for collaboration, and the role it plays in helping to inspire innovation and engaging with each other. So it's going to be technology in the future that's really connecting us, not just our office spaces. But, you know, the interesting thing is that a lot of the conversations are focusing on returning to the office from a safety and a well-being perspective. And I've been working remotely to some degree for over 20 years now. And, you know, these new opportunities are great, but they also bring with them a number of challenges that we now need to think as people are going to be working in this distributed environment. Once we get past dealing with the safety issues, we're going to have to think, how do we as leaders, whether we are solo practitioner, whether we are working with a team, or whether we are working with our clients to help them, how are we going to get the best, inspire and motivate our people in this environment? And I'm going to turn it over to Kathy now to talk about some of the challenges. Over to you.
Hey, thanks, Janine. So what Janine just did was kind of wrap up for us or summarize us for what's happened from March until just now, till like what we're already into July, right? So there's been a lot of changes. And we know that even pre-COVID, there were certainly challenges with employees and employee engagement. What we want to ask you now is, just if you don't mind putting in the chat, what are your biggest challenges right now? You know, thinking about going back to work for sure, but just inside your businesses, or, you know, if you're a solo practitioner, and I'm not sure how many we have on that are company or solos, you know, what are you hearing from clients that are their biggest challenge just in terms of navigating with their employees, or, you know, navigating this new world? So I'm just gonna look, Janine's gonna share with us what we see. I'll give you a minute to type in the chat box for us. We want to hear from you guys, what you're hearing too.
So Deborah's saying that they're working at 50% of capacity in their office at Concord, and
Yeah,
communications efficiencies between employees.
interesting. Okay, financial survivals, like yeah, that's huge, right?
Yeah, that's still on the mind of a lot of people, is that survival, especially as we start to see things happening now.
And we even named this, you know, survive to thrive, right? People are distracted. Donna, I'm sorry, says people are distracted. It's hard to get colleagues to focus. That's a huge. And managing employees remotely, where some employees do well. Yeah, some have never worked from home, right? Correct. And then Megan says, go ahead, want to read that one, Janine, for Megan?
Megan's talking about clients who are small companies are struggling with recalling employees. Reluctant employees, not the right employees. They have work, but they feel like their employees are not committed. I think this is something that we are hearing, is that, you know, you have employees who are coming back, and it's not even, it's small companies, it's mid-size that are worried about coming back, and how do you deal with those? And do you have the right people to survive, to manage and thrive in this new world? And the idea that some of the people, and some people are not as committed as others. So how do we, which I think really leads into exactly what you want to talk about.
Yeah, so some of the things we're hearing too that a couple of people didn't mention are, you know, customer engagement, and then employees feeling isolated and disconnected. So that's another one that's coming up a lot. And so why we wanted to hear from all of you what your problems were your clients, you're hearing from your clients. But the most important thing is, Janine, can you change, are you able to change the slides for me? Okay, thanks. So what this really ties into are your employees, right? Investing in your employees and finding out what's going on with them. So the question here is, you know, what does engagement look like? And so what we want to do from now is, Janine had just summed up what it's looked like in the past, as I was starting to say. And then what we want to do, talk about like what's the real impact from employee engagement? Where does it really fit into all of this? And then we're going to wrap up with providing some real tools and some action plan that you can really move forward with. So the second part that we want to really talk about is some statistics here. And then also, what is engagement? A lot of people, just like culture, there's a lot of these terms, buzzwords, but what does engagement mean? To us, employee engagement means referring to the level of connection and commitment an employee has to its organization. So the statistic here from Gallup, interestingly enough, as I share the statistics, from 2013 to 2019, they haven't shifted very much, maybe 31 to 33, but they've really been pretty much consistent. And so why these statistics make a difference is because there is a real ROI attached to employee engagement, which we'll show you shortly. So what do we see here? 33% engaged. So I read you the definition of engagement, but what that looks like in terms of employees showing up excited for work on Monday, they really look forward to it, they're passionate about what they do, and they really feel like they make a difference in the world. So that's about a third of our workforce, which is a little frightening, right? Other 2/3 are broken into two different groups. 52%, I call them the just showing up group. They like direct deposit, they like benefits, and they fly under the radar. They're never going to go much above, they're never going to go too far below, they're just going to kind of ride out the wave. For whatever reason, they either become disillusioned with the company or they don't align with their values, but they just show up anymore. And the last group are the really difficult group, the actively disengaged. We call them toxic. Their attitude is negative and it's contagious, and that's really dangerous. So let's talk about what behaviors we can assign to engage versus disengage. So the third on the left side here, engage. They're optimistic. They generally be a little more optimistic. They're team oriented. They go above and beyond, and they really accept credit. And they accept credit. They like to share their credits, but they accept blame for the things that they do. So they take responsibility. The other, what should we say, 69% or 2/3 of it, is the behaviors that we sometimes see in various grades of them is being pessimistic, being Debbie Downers, we call them, hate to use a generic term, self-centered, high, there's this usually the higher rate of absenteeism in people that are disengaged. Also egocentric. They focus a little more on the money, the worth of money. That's why they show up, that direct deposit kind of thing. So when we see that, that's really a little scary. So when we tie those behaviors to, being more engaged, we can see that obviously we're going to have better, we're going to have a bigger impact. Yeah. And so the benefits, what are the benefits to it? Thanks, Janine. The benefits are that highly engaged performers, we use 3 different metrics to kind of gauge to measure the engagement. Sorry about that. To measure the engagement. So these 3 different things: customer ratings, we see a 10% plus in that area. Productivity and profitability, 21, 22%. So we can see that there's a direct impact by that. What we also know is companies with these highly engaged workforces are better than their competitors. Their earnings per share are over 147%. Now, if you have a small company, you might say, well, that's not me. But think about it in terms of your customers, but think about it in terms of your own, maybe you have 1099s. So when we can really be, when we can really be more engaged in our own businesses, sometimes we're kind of checked out of our own businesses even, and we can see that that makes a huge difference in terms of the profitability of our company. And
yeah, Kathy, we have a question from Joe about, are these stats reflective of pre-COVID?
Absolutely, yeah. That's why I said the first one, the Employee Engagement Gallup, was like from 2013 to 2019. That's been pretty consistent. And this Gallup, Janine, do you remember what year we found this Gallup one in?
This was a recent, but I can't remember the year. Just going back to Joe, the changes in terms of engagement, people are feeling there's an increased engagement as people are working remotely, but it's still not significant. So I think that the impact, and we certainly don't know these numbers in terms of the benefits, the impact yet.
Yeah, but in summarizing these 2 slides, what we hear, and this was an interesting quote from the Neuro Leadership Institute, and that is that people can quit and leave, or they can actually quit and stay. And that's the really scary part, right? That if they quit, but they still remain, that really has a big impact on the bottom line of every organization. And so what's the real one factor that makes a difference? The manager accounts for 70% of the variance in the team engagement. Now that can be plus or that can be negative, right? So the more engaged the manager is, probably the more engaged the employees are. There's a lot of discussion about, what's a good manager or not. We don't have time to get into that today, but I can tell you that it's a leadership, and it starts at the top that really trickles down the effect. It's just the way it works. And it really does translate to better customer satisfaction and also higher profitability. So with that, Janine, I don't see any more questions. Why don't you take it over from there?
All right, I will. Thank you. Yes, and I think this tone at the top is critical. It is so important in these times of crisis, what comes out and how leaders emerge and how leaders deal with their own personal situation and how help their employees and the people around them is critical. It really is the true test, and the tone does come from the top. So each of us have a key role to play, not just in ourselves, but helping our teams and clients. And so Kathy and I have identified 5 C's that we encourage individuals, leaders, and everyone to look at in terms of engaging their employees: culture, communications, connections, contributions, and coaching. And we'll talk a little bit about each one of these. So let's start with culture. So what is culture? Culture is simply put, culture is the way that things are done around here. Now, your culture, whether it's your own as an individual, as your own as a company, or your client's culture, are uniquely yours. It really is what sets you apart and what defines you in the market. And it really is what communicates to your employees, to your clients, and to your partners and all your stakeholders who you are and how you do business. And two key elements contribute to culture: purpose and values. Purpose is what defines why you exist. We often talk about what we do and how we do it. Your purpose is why you do it. Because today, employees, and especially millennials, are all looking for meaning in what they're doing. And as we're going through COVID, you often hear people talk about, I'm reflecting on what I'm doing and where I'm working and what contribution am I making. I want to feel like what I do makes a difference. And it's your purpose that helps you communicate that difference that you're trying to make in the lives of your customers or clients, in the lives of your communities, and or in the lives of to the world. So, for example, I'll just use Price Waterhouse's purpose is to build trust in society and to solve important problems. This puts all of the work and all the projects that they do into a different light for their employees. It also guides the decisions that they make as a leadership team in terms of how they respond to crises like either the pandemic or like the racial situation that we have today. So along with your purpose, your values work hand in hand, and it's your values that define the behaviors that you need to exhibit in order to achieve your purpose. If your purpose is your North Star, your values are going to guide the behaviors to get there. So for example, I'll use Price Waterhouse again. Their values to go with their purpose are act with integrity, work together, care, reimagine the possible, and make a difference. And we each have our own values and what we can do. So there's a long way to go, because you can see from the stats that very few of the employees agree or understand, agree that their mission makes their job important, or that they even know what their company stand for or can apply their values. So what can we do as a leader in helping our clients? One, make sure that there is a purpose that is articulated, and make sure that it is used as a guiding theme and as a North Star for what you do. We, as in all of the work that we do, helping our emerging growth tech companies grow, we start with purpose and values, because that's the foundation. That is the foundation that helps them build a brand, it helps them differentiate themselves, and it helps them attract the talent they need. And you need to tell stories to bring your purpose to life. So for example, I saw the story, which I thought was wonderful because it really exemplified this. DTE Energy is a Detroit-based energy company. And it is, they had a CEO come in to transform the company. They weren't doing very well. So they started by articulating their purpose. And he was skeptical when he did this. And they stated the purpose as, we serve with our energy the lifeblood of communities and the engine of progress. They then made a video that showcased the company's people, whether from the factory workers, the plant operators, the truck drivers, the office workers, and they described the impact that each of these was making on the communities that they served, the doctors, the teachers, the businesses. And when they showed the video to the first group of professional workers, they stood up and gave a standing ovation. But when they showed it to the union members, some of the union members were moved to tears, because it was the first time that their work had ever been portrayed as contributing to the greater good. It's not unlike our essential workers today. So making sure that people feel like the work they do makes a difference is critical. They then wove it into all of their onboarding, their training, their communications, everything that they did. And, to the point their engagement scores climbed. They received a great place to work for 5 years in a row. But most importantly, their stock more than tripled over the next 9 years. So we may be much smaller, and maybe we work with smaller companies, but the impact is still significant. And then sort of recognize, reward your people for demonstrating the values. But most importantly, as Kathy talked about those toxic behaviors, don't accept or tolerate them, because your culture is going to be defined by the lowest common denominator. Just think about Enron, Wells Fargo, and Volkswagen, and the list goes on. So,
Janine, I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you go back to the other slide? Alex had a question on that. Or Alex, do you want to unmute?
Yeah, I actually read it wrong, but I did have the question about, sometimes people don't know their values, don't know the company's values. So that's why I was looking at this. 23% seems a low percentage. And so that was my first question, was I was thinking, okay, what percentage actually know the values of their company? Because I think those get lost over time unless they're repeated and demonstrated and then rewarded on a regular basis.
You are absolutely right. And I didn't see a stat in terms of how many know it. I know that for a stat for it, so I'm going to say it's probably the majority, because there is a stat that says 72% of employees don't even know their company strategy. So I think it's fair to say if they don't know their strategy, they don't know their values. And in fact, I have seen research where they've even asked the leadership team and they can't recite them. So I think it's the perfect setup to the next thing, which is, because of all of these challenges, it is really, communications is critical. And communications is so critical in today's world, in today's pandemic world, when we are all working remotely. And, I love this quote by George Bernard Shaw that says the single biggest problem in communications is the illusion that has taken place. And I've had CEOs say, well, I told them what the strategy was. I told them what the values were. Well, there's a reason why advertising works and it's repetitive. So I think that one of the things that we're seeing is, in addition to maybe not knowing what our strategy and values are, we're also getting this, how we communicate has changed significantly. We have multiple communications channels, Slack and messaging, and nowadays Zoom. And we are all starting to feel this level of Zoom fatigue. And it's a real thing, because when you're doing a video conference and when you're meeting on the computer, you're really sort of paying attention to, do I look like I'm focused? You're staring at the screen. And we need to be thinking about, and we miss a lot of the body language and cues, because you can't scan the room. You can only see people's faces from the head up. So we may see our hands, gesticulating, but really you miss a lot of that body language and cues. And the other thing that happens in terms of communications is you get inconsistent messages or messages not getting through. So if you ever remember the game telephone, if your people are communicating one-on-one, you're not getting that message from the top. And we know that 85% of employees want the communications from their leadership, especially today, in terms of what's going on and how are their companies doing. And so we're not getting a lot of that spontaneity. And so what can we do? We can use a variety of channels, mix it up. We've been using Zoom for 3 months, or whichever tool that you're using, GoToMeeting, WebEx, whatever it is, but we've been using this for so long, but maybe it's time to go back and start to mix it up. Use the phone for some meetings, use the email if you can, use chat when you can, use video and when you need to, and maybe start a video conference and then let everybody go to audio, or shorten the video conference. Make sure that your video conferences are engaging. The other one is be intentional. And this is really about thinking through and making a conscious commitment to communicating effectively. Communicate your values, communicate your purpose, communicate your strategy, communicate what you're doing, communicate what the results are and the progress is, so everybody is on the same page at the same time. And if you think that you've been communicating enough, keep communicating. You need to over-communicate almost to the point of feeling discomfort. Use all hands meetings, team meetings, one-on-one meetings, written communications, keep the channels open. As we're communicating, I think we need to really demonstrate this empathy. We need to sort of check in, not just check up. And we need to listen, build in some time for those water cooler discussions, build in some time to listen to what employees and what people need and ideas that people have, so that you can incorporate those and they feel included. And lastly, be human, be transparent, be authentic. It's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay not to have all of the answers. So I'm going to turn it over to Kathy, but I see Megan has a question. Yes, Megan, employers definitely need to be able to change up their values. And I think this is really, really important, as you say, in today's environment. Your values are really tied to what it is that you want to be seen as and known for, and what you stand for. And so it is always a great idea to review your values, review what they look like in practice, and to change them and update them as needed. All right. So, Kathy.
Yeah, Janine, I know we're running close to, a little over time. Hope everybody can stay. We will definitely finish before 10:45. So I just wanted to add that in. So I have a little different perspective on the values. So I think that, it's absolutely critical to review them from time to time, but I don't think changing them should be taken lightly. I really think that, the behavior should be matching to the values. But when I work with organizations, I always ask them, the litmus test is, if you were to start another company, would you take these same values with you? So I think you have to be open to including others if you might have forgotten some or some aren't being observed anymore. But I think it's an exercise that's to be taken very seriously and really needs to be, encompass the leadership team. So just add my 2 cents in on that one.
That's absolutely right. It's not to be taken, but exactly and people need to be engaged and involved in the process. It shouldn't be just a top-down discussion either. It needs to be, it needs to engage all of the employees to understand what the values are and what they mean. It's not just defining the words, getting the words. It's really describing the behavior so people understand what they look like in practice.
And then I think, as Lex said before, even rewarding them, making sure that they're being rewarded and lived. And Lex also said, and to have those crucial conversations. Yeah, you have to have it, have the conversations. Did anybody else want to, there you go. Did you want to say something else, Lex?
I was just going to say that there are some leaders and managers that are uncomfortable with conflict. And so they struggle with having those critical and crucial conversations because they just don't know where that's going to go. So I think that's a challenge sometimes, and especially remotely, because it makes it even more difficult for some of them.
And Kathy's going to talk about this, but I'm going to link this back to the values, because in the work that we've done, what we've seen is that it's the values that actually give people language that they can use to help make those conversations easier. They will always be difficult, but if you can identify your values and look like and define them and communicate what they look like in practice, so people know what a good behavior looks like versus what not so good behavior looks like, it starts to give people language and conversations to be able to interact and have that conversation with their colleagues.
Mm-hmm. I'm also looking at that racial inequality. I think sometimes you have to be comfortable with how your own feelings are before you can start those conversations and get in touch with what your feelings are and what your concerns are, and how you can move forward with having those conversations with your employees.
Exactly.
Yeah, good point, Alex. Thank you for sharing that. So our third factor is we identified contributions. And actually, as Janine mentioned, we're going to talk about that right now. So holding ourselves accountable and holding others accountable. So we know that there was a Harvard business study that said 18% of top executives said that they're challenged by this. And that was pre-COVID. To mention Joe's question before, it was a pre or post in terms of the stats, but this one was actually pre-COVID. And now what we're finding is it's even harder because they feel like they're more challenged with the pandemic and what's going on in people's lives. And it's really becoming even more challenging. So to have those conversations, and again, bringing, as Alex said, the uncomfortable conversations. And that really comes up to, where a manager doesn't deal with them, and then we have an issue with poor performance, right? Not asking what's wrong, or not holding people accountable and saying, hey, did you do this? And so with 17% of a manager's life being taken up per day on that, over a week, it's actually a full day. So we can see that that's non-productive time. The squeaky wheel is getting all the oil, and the good people are getting ignored a little bit. Giving feedback virtually, again, those difficult conversations like Alex mentioned, is really tough. And then flexible work schedules, where that's a real challenge for companies and for people themselves. Some people that are used to working from home, like Janine's been home for 20 years and myself for about 6, we're a little more used to it, but other people aren't, and it leads to other things too. So how can we solve this problem? What are some action plans that we can do? Setting those boundaries are really, really crucial. As of July, some companies are starting to say that childcare, taking care of your children while you're working, is not acceptable. We're seeing that in the news a lot. And some companies are saying that in July, we have to go back to, if you're working remote, you have to be working full-time remote. So that's raising a lot of challenges, especially for women employees, because they tend to be a little more on the caretaking side. Treat people like adults, hire them to do a job and then let them do it. Reviewing those goals and progresses more often, right? So we used to do it once a year, and let's do that more often. And then recognizing all the good work that they do. People want to feel valued. They want to be recognized for contributing. Be a good role model. And then people want to be heard. Allow them to have input, Alexa's saying, let's have those conversations, and then, deal with the underperformers, but also hold people accountable is kind of the wrap up on this one. So our fourth factor is connection. And this is huge today. Connection being the feeling of isolation that we know is just huge. People, again, not used to working from home and losing that sense of friendship and connections at work. 52% say they miss the social interactions, 55% feel less connected. So what do we have? We have disengaged, right? Disconnected people. And when we know when they're disconnected, they're less engaged, their work suffers, and they're not as productive. And so the other challenge is really keeping these furloughed employees connected. So right now they're not part of the workforce, but we know we want to bring them back. And so how can you engage them? So a couple opportunities and what we can do with that. We can include them, the furloughed and our own employees, in social activities, right? Joe and the USA 500 have done a fabulous job of doing it one way, then pivoting and really meeting people where they are. And I think that really speaks well to any organization. And if you're a solo practitioner, I mean, meeting your clients' needs as they're changing. So wine tastings, I did the Travis one last week from the Boston group. I mean, we're getting the flavor, all of the groups across the board. I would have never known maybe about the wine tasting one, and that was so much fun. Trivia night, all kinds of good things. Cooking classes, Joe mentioned earlier. The random coffees, our DTQs, all of those, but companies can do them big or small, and you can do them for your clients if you are a smaller company, and including everybody in them. So yet we know that making employees feel connected is a new reality, and it's a new challenge. There's a gap. 79% of companies and organizations agree that they need to foster the sense of belonging, and yet only 13% that they're actually prepared to do so. That's a big gap. That's a lot of work that needs to be done. And our last one, our fifth factor, and this is one that speaks close, near and dear to my heart as an executive coach and a business coach, is what I'm hearing from clients. Some of the corporate clients and my nonprofits are, they miss that office interaction. So we can use coaching and a sense of developing our people to overcome these challenges. We're hearing challenges about building trust. Don't take it for granted that the trust you built before COVID is still there if they're working and they're disconnected. Professional development, that's huge, especially the millennials, and Janine mentioned it earlier. Access to any kind of learning is really huge. Mobile learning is very inexpensive. It can be done easily. And then dealing with problem employees, but also employees' problems. I think that's really huge. We need to really listen to employees about their problems. So how can we use coaching? So the first thing we can do is ask really empowering questions. Ask questions and then listen. Alex mentioned it, Janine mentioned, everybody mentions it. Like, listen, Joe always talks about, I ask my people, and every time I want to call Joe, he's always like, what do you think? What do you think? So asking people, being self-aware, and also just tapping into yourself. How am I feeling? And then, asking employees the same thing, how are they feeling? Peer learning, all these kinds of things can really come into play. Sometimes employees are just bored, so giving them projects and then fostering this whole sense of problems, like problem solving. So in coaching, we say, if you have a problem, what are the 5 things you came up with that we might be able to solve it? So get your employees to actually kind of learn how to self-coach. So those are the 5 factors, and I know we're running short on time, so I want to turn it over to Janine and we can wrap up from here.
Those are the 5 factors. And I think on that coaching, I think personal development in this time is so critical, because we all want growth, but when we're all distributed, what does that mean in terms of career paths and how you develop the skills you need to be able to grow and move on? So in summary, we have 5 C's, and what we would really encourage, we could have spent a time on each one of those a day, or what we want to do is inspire ourselves and to work with our clients to ask ourselves 5 questions each day. So first, how did I bring our company purpose and values to life today? Did I effectively communicate with my team or my clients or my other stakeholders? Did I recognize someone for their contributions or for demonstrating and role modeling the values that are critical and so important to us? Who did I connect with, and who did I help someone else connect with, whether it's someone on my team or even a client? How did I help them expand their network? And what did I do today to help myself and or someone on my team or client to expand and to enhance their professional growth and development? I think those 5 questions, we think that we can go a long way to helping to inspire and motivate employees. And as Kathy said earlier, the benefits are significant. So we really want to be able to sort of try and help our clients thrive as they come out of this pandemic and be able to realize the benefits of engagement. And I think that's it. I will answer any more questions, but we have a question for the audience as we're wrapping up. We'd like you to write in the chat box one thing that you took away from today and will do as a result of the conversation.
So Janine, I think people are still starting to think about those things, but in the meantime, we want to definitely tell you thank you for staying. I know we ran a little over, but hopefully we included the Q&A in between. So let's see.
Can I ask a
Yep.
question just while
Sure,
people are typing stuff in? So now everybody obviously knows my employees on here because everybody deals with Lauren and Jen, and most of you don't deal with Lynn. But one of the things I kind of came in awareness is I have been so personally driven about adapting and pivoting to the new reality of what is that I find myself sometimes, in fact, like right now, I haven't talked to Lauren in a week because I get these ideas in my head, I put them on paper, and I say, go do it. Sometimes with less communications, with the hope that maybe there's their faith in my decision making or my strategies will work. But sometimes I find myself not engaging with Jen or Lauren except for to say, get this done, get it done now. That's not our normal, what was the normal. But now, in order to provide value to my members through USA 500, I have found myself just going 18 hours a day planning and strategizing and trying to think of ways to keep members engaged that I've kind of disengaged, really, frankly, with my two closest cohorts, which are Lauren and Jen. And I actually kind of feel the distance happening a little bit. How would you propose re-engaging?
So I'll
As
answer.
simple as just re-engaging, I know, or
Yeah, so I mean, and I deal with assessments sometimes, and so when I meet somebody that's a real action taker, and a lot of my high, senior level executives are real action takers, I think sometimes it's just that catching ourselves. So that number one, you already have it, self-awareness, like, oh, it's been a little while, let me re-engage. And then I think the second thing is asking them, like, how much engagement do you need? What really works for you? And just having that discussion and asking them to tell you how they feel about that. And I think that that's just really starts the conversation. So number one, the self-awareness, and the more often you check in with yourself, the sooner you'll catch yourself doing that. So good for you for, thinking about that. And then the second thing is ask them, maybe they like it. Maybe they like often doing the thing. They seem to be very highly driven people too. Maybe get some parameters from them and see what they really feel is, is what's a good level for them.
Right.
Another thought, Joe, is that what you're saying is I'm going super fast and I feel like I need to slow down. And especially with them, because they're such an integral part, to just slow down and have let's just do a half an hour, 45 minutes or an hour of just, how's it going? How are you doing, right? Just to slow down. What's going on in your life right now? Because they're both very social people, and there's a lot going on. I mean, like the other day I had Lauren after our practicum, and just asking, how's it like now? You don't have to drive. That must be a good thing for you, and just those things, because I know some of the challenges that she's had. And just taking that time to maybe, every 2 weeks or, start off, doing it a little bit random and then say, maybe we should do this every 2 weeks, see how it goes. But it's just really putting the brakes on to have a conversation with them about what's going on with them in their lives.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it doesn't have to be like, I think you can do it. It can be half an hour. It can be check-in. It can be one-on-one. It can be grouped together. I think the other thing is you're all going very quickly and they're all very action-oriented. You don't want to lose the opportunity to get their input either, because you're each working on things, getting things done. How are you taking that input that they're getting from dealing on the front lines to help you sort of keep moving things forward and adapting on the fly? So I think there's the check-ins, as Alex said, it's critical, and Kathy, and then there's also how do you integrate that into the work that you're doing to get their thoughts to help move the organization forward.
And Joe, one more thing is storytelling. They might have, because they're going nonstop, tell me a story. You know, use that maybe even as just tell me a story of something that's happened to you recently with one of the members or something, and that stood out for you. Or, you know, what I mean, just to have those kind of authentic conversations, but also that shares insights for all of you.
Okay. No, thank you. Yeah, because I find I'm not a micromanager in the slightest. I give an idea and I say get it done by this date, and I trust that you'll get it done. But again, there does become a disconnect when I'm sitting in my office, literally creating plans all day long, plus
Right.
going to meetings and all the normal stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And I found that there's I sort of, I don't want to say it's my way or the highway type thing, but that's kind of how it works out, right?
Right.
I'm not saying that, but it's
Right.
sort of how I just am throwing out the commands, if you will. And I'm not normally like that, but
And have you had that conversation to say, you know
no,
what?
I haven't had. Literally, all I'm doing, I'm spending, as you guys know. I mean, I'm on
Right.
6 meetings a day for 8 or 9 hours. Plus, I'm doing the planning. Plus, I'm trying to set up new relationships with vendors to do new online activities, things like that. So I really haven't had a lot of time to engage,
Yeah.
except for quick. Yes, do it this way. Do it this when there's questions that they need answered.
Right.
Right.
And I think that's a critical conversation to have too as part of that. So it's like 3 steps, having a critical conversation saying, I know I have been going crazy here and it's just been shooting things at you sometimes. And that's not how I normally like to communicate. And I just want to talk to you about that. How's it? And I also want to find out how you're doing.
That's
You know,
right.
just having that kind of conversation to open up and then say, and I'd also like to set up times just to see, you know, let's maybe next week or so, just to hear what are some experiences you've had that are crazy or really or heartwarming or something of that sort, just because I'd like to stay connected.
Right. It's not about, you know, Joe, you use the term, you're not a micromanager. And I think
Right.
I just support everything that Alexa's saying. It's really about checking in. It's about checking in, you know, how are things going? Do you need anything from me? What are you learning? What are you hearing? How can we do this? So it's not a checkup on what you're doing. It's a checking in on how you are doing.
And my warning would be not to make it sound like a list of tasks of check-ins, right? It's just more of a conversation.
Exactly.
How are you doing? Good. Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. Check. Next one. We have 2 minutes.
Thank you so
So
much.
did we more than answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much
Thanks,
to
Jeremy.
Janine and Kathy. I think one thing, Janine, and based just sort of going off of what Joe, your question, and Jean, something that really struck Janine, something that really struck me in what you said, is the water cooler discussions. You know, in the virtual world, you know, it's not there, and recreating it, like Joe, to your point, and you know, you wouldn't necessarily see, you know, Lauren and Jen all the time, but that water cooler, that metaphorical water cooler discussion of, hey, how's your kid doing? How's your wife doing? How was your doctor's appointment last week? Did you see the Red Sox game, you know, when the Sox are back up and playing? Like, recreating that somehow authentically is going to be an interesting challenge for Kathy and Janine and others similar to you that we're all missing in this go environment that we've been thrust into.
Well, and just want to say, and it's that, and it's also, Jeremy, I had a young lawyer tell me that they missed the office because about 15%, he estimated about 15% of his learning and development came from bumping into people in the office.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, that's right.
It's really,
That's right. So there's going to be innovators for how do you somehow recreate that?
correct.
Well, thank you so much. I just housekeeping, guys. You can do it yourselves, but I did download the chat, and I'll email it. I'll email it as a Word document, but you can do it too. But just from a belts and suspenders standpoint, I did.